We're live on video. Stand by for audio. Good day and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another Live the Fuel show. So this evening, at least in my time, I'm chatting with a new guest co-host who is not in the evening because she's in another country today. She's in Australia. So we love talking about healthy lifestyle diversity on this show, besides business and everything else. But she's really living it. And we're going to be catching up with, that's right, an award-winning journalist known to stun many a personality with her quick-witted intros and on-air antics. And let's just say, she might have left Paula Abdul in a laughing fit and Havana Brown choking. I mean, she's even interviewed Katie Lang and Jennifer Beals and so many other. The list goes on. She's been around the block. But she's recently launched, get this, guys, another podcaster, a brand new podcast, The Ginni Show, Curry, Comedy, and Connectivity. And so again, airing from Australia, welcome to the show, our new guest co-host, Ginni Saraswati.
Scott, thank you for having me. Quite an intro. It makes me sound a little more promiscuous than a podcaster, but I will take that.
Well, I mean, you wrote it, and I get to say it. So
exactly.
I mean, you've got some quick-witted fun. So
it's one of those things that you write and you think, oh, perhaps I should have been a little bit more contextual what I was going to say, but I'll take that as awesome. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm really excited to be here on this podcast.
I'm excited to have you. And just to help with our over-the-seas internet lag, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to jump right into screen sharing. So we're going to have her actually shut your video off to get us a better signal, because this is what podcasters do. And we have Zoom. So we're harnessing the power of Zoom and video. So, and obviously, Ginni, our audio probably cleared right up, didn't it?
It cleared right up. I can actually hear you a lot better. It's also the kangaroos over here in Australia. They actually carry a lot of our internet power, so they probably are just speeding up now because there's
darn
no
kangaroos. Seriously, I mean, come on. Didn't they ever hear of sharing is caring?
We don't like to share here down under.
Well, listen. I gotta say right off the bat, I love your job title. You're the chief
chat officer.
So I am the chief intrepid officer.
Nice.
So I went with, but when I spell it out, I capitalized the E in intrepid, so it's CEO. You're the CCO. But I chose intrepid because intrepid defined suggests a lack of fear in dealing with something new or unknown.
Nice. It's very poetic there, Scott.
Oh yeah, I'm geeking out with you right now. So why did you choose chief chat? I mean, clearly you like to chat.
Well, funnily enough, I do love to chat, and I've managed to, in some way, shape, or form, forge a career out of it. But I guess the chief chat officer, why I kind of wanted that title more than a CEO is basically that's what I do all day. I talk to different people, and some of these conversations are recorded, some of these are not. But I guess so much of my life, a conversation's really been a turning point for how I've managed to either form a relationship, or I guess in a way have a vehicle to learn something about someone. Because it was someone who told me when I moved to New York, one of the first events I went to, one of the speakers there said that it takes a conversation to really listen and then walk away to be able to create something. So that's why I kind of intentionally put chief chat officer as my title, because that is what I do. And I guess podcasting as a whole, that's what we do. We have conversations with other people, and these do impact the ears, the minds, and the hearts of others. So being such an intimate medium, that's what we do, Scott. Like, we're actually literally in someone's ear right now, and we're talking to them, and it's such an impactful medium. So it all starts with a conversation.
So you definitely appreciate what we talk a lot as a fellow podcaster. There's the power of that intimate conversation. Like, you're kind of eavesdropping in on us right now. That's what our listeners are doing, right? We're having a great conversation.
Absolutely.
And it's not socially awkward where, like, if you're in a restaurant, all of a sudden somebody just leans in and just jams their ear right up against you while you're having a private conversation. That happens.
It reminds me of Homer Simpson, that episode where he appears in and out of the bush. It's like that in real life, but on a podcast, it's socially acceptable behavior to eavesdrop. But it's very true there, Scott. It's like we're having a conversation, but in some way, shape, or form, whoever's listening is a part of the conversation too, even though they may not be actively participating in it.
So I'm wondering, how far back did you become let's just go ahead and admit it. Like, we're obsessed with podcasting. So how far back did you really get plugged in?
Well, in 2004, that's when the iPod came out. And I started in radio in 2006. I was training up to be a radio host on a station here in Melbourne called Joy 94.9, which is an FM music station. And I guess at the time, because the iPod was out and podcasts were being made left, right, and center, a lot of the major networks around the world, and here in Australia too, what they would do is any kind of radio programming that was out there, they would cut parts of certain interviews, or if you have a celebrity on the show, they'd cut parts of the radio program and turn it into a podcast. So this behavior of, I guess, on-demand radio was coming up, where, you know, if you missed a breakfast show, you could always catch it on the podcast. So technically I was a podcaster then in 2007 to, my 10-year radio career. That's when I had my podcast, but it wasn't, technically mine. It was the station's.
Sure.
But the Ginni Show, I actually came up with the concept 3 years ago, and I've been kind of building it and revamping it since. So I guess technically having my own podcast, Scott, it's been 3 years, but I've been a podcaster pretty much since the day I opened the microphone and, fell in love with the headphones behind a panel.
See, I didn't even realize that podcasting was even being considered as a secondary form of medium for the radio stations back then, because obviously nowadays everybody just digital records all their content, and now all the big players like NPR and everybody else are just duplicating and just launching a podcast with the same content, and just that way they're just covering their bases, I guess. So, but you actually had a podcast that far back.
I did. I don't think we thought of it in the way and in the context of podcasting that we do today, because obviously nowadays with content being consumed so digitally, that's what we think about. But back then it was very easy for us to have like a 3-hour radio program, and we'd have 3 guest interviews or 3 guest spots on there that we'd cut up and we'd pop on to iTunes just from the radio station feed. So yeah, that was pretty interesting.
So, and actually I'm just reading through your bio again, but you actually had multiple shows then.
So back then at Joy 94.9, I had 2 breakfast shows, one called The Hump Day Crew and Rise Up Radio. And I was also on LA Talk Radio for a brief stint. And then, when I started my own personal podcasting journey, I had 3 podcasts: the Monday Mocha, the Daily Gin, and the Ginni Show. But I've just put it all under one umbrella now, being the Ginni Show and incorporating the other 2 podcasts I had. It just made sense for me to kind of make it a bit more of a documentary of my journey rather than fragments of it.
I love the fact you chose to do that, because that's like back when I started creating Live the Fuel, like I'm passionate about health, business, and lifestyle, and those could easily stand individually as their own shows. And I started digging into it because I'm a sales and marketing nutball. And I was like, there's not a lot of shows trying to show the balance of the 3. Everybody kind of stands apart in different areas, like your health and fitness, or your health and wellness, or you're an entrepreneur show, or you're a business thing. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to fuel people's health, business, and lifestyle, and I'm going to have my co-host do the same, and let's try and stand out and be something different. And I'm with you, though. Like a couple of times I thought, maybe should I have had them as separate platforms? And it's great to see how you actually did have it that way, and you decide, you know what? No, let's keep it pure. Let's put it back together, and that way people get all of me in one show.
Exactly. I think at the end of the day, it comes back to, sometimes when people start a podcast, there's 2 different ways of approaching it. You can start a podcast with, having a vision of who your listener is going to be, down to the very detail of, what do they do, how do they consume content, do they commute to work, or you can build some content out there in the hope that a kind of listener will find you. So what I found was I was having a very direct kind of impact on people in terms of how I was creating my own life and defining my own version of happiness. So I think that all fell under the same umbrella of the Ginni Show, and it made sense. And the guys at Nova Entertainment really helped me map that out and be really aware of what content I was creating. And it just made sense for me as well to put it all under one umbrella. And it definitely does help things logistically as well in terms of, scheduling and everything. But at the end of the day, it's your listener that you create the show for. That's who you write and create the content for, to give them value. So it just made sense for me, Scott.
I love the fact you just hit it on that. Like a lot of podcasters are trying to put the listener first, right? We're trying to put quality content out there. But part of that quality content what I'm getting from you, and I know I stand for, is I've realized in 2.5 years, podcasting, I was already obsessed with it before. I wasn't as early as you were. I was listening, probably I really started getting into it in like 08, 09. And then obviously since launching a show, I've now attested the power of podcasting as a host. It's allowed me to get even more comfortable, even more transparent, and even more vulnerable, and letting people into that, more intimate side or more details of my life. And I feel I actually honor that. I respect that. I think that our listeners, I would hope, also appreciate that, because they get drawn closer to you and they feel more connected. How do you ring in on that?
Oh, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And we were touching before on just how intimate this medium is, because we are in someone's ear. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was training for radio, when I first applied to be at the radio station, they were offering a course. It was a Certificate 3 in radio broadcasting. And essentially, there'd be hosts of the station or trainers at the station who'd train you on how to host and broadcast a radio show. And I remember when I applied for this course, they asked, if you were to continue working at this station, what would you want to do? And I remember, Scott, I ticked every single box but wanting to be on air. And the reason I did that was, even though at the time I was studying, theater and performing arts, so, I didn't have a fear of public speaking, but I knew as soon as I got behind the mic, I would be on a whole different level of intimate and a whole different level of connection, because when I opened the mic, I wasn't playing a character or reading a script. I was being me. Mm-hmm. And I know that radio and podcasting too, radio or podcasting has never really been a medium that you sit around Friday night with some popcorn and you listen to a podcast. That's not really in our culture at the moment. I don't know if it's forming, but it's not really in the culture where it's like a Friday night movies type thing. It's generally something that people consume by themselves. So that intimacy factor is very high. And you know that your impact factor is going to be very high too, based on that. So I think you're right. You hit the nail on the head there, meaning that, it is a real strong vehicle to build that one-on-one connection with someone who's listening on the other end.
So would you say podcasting kind of got you even more open and even more transparent since the radio days? Because we are talking about two different, platforms of media.
Yeah. Yeah, it took me a while to transition over from radio to podcasting in terms of my presentation style, because obviously radio, you've got people who are kind of regulating you. You've got the industry regulators, and you've got the team at the station, like the program directors, who are kind of guiding you on what you should, not more or less should and shouldn't say. And there are obviously broadcasting regulations that you've got to follow. But for me, I think the key difference between the two is I found that when I first started my podcast, the Ginni Show Wednesday episodes were very heavily produced. And some people don't like the real clean cut radio sounding audio when it comes to podcasts. It's almost seen as intrusive now, if that makes sense. But I guess what made me transition over was the fact that, I wasn't reading the weather or reading the news or a traffic report. I had to talk about authentic conversations that mattered to me. And that's what's played out for me too, Scott. Like over time, I found that whether I'm listening to a podcast or I'm hosting one, authenticity is probably the key driver when it comes to a podcast. How authentic you're being in that conversation and in that moment. It's not a pre-produced or pre-planned thing that you'd probably get in radio back in the day.
Right.
But so I guess that, authenticity is something that it's an ongoing journey for me, but podcasting has definitely helped.
Well, and that's why I wanted to bring that up, because obviously I have no problem being honest. I would say in the past 6 months, I probably have casually thrown in how, I am definitely not the romantic guru, even though I'm engaged to be married now in March. And I was the guy.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah. I was a self-proclaimed bachelor forever, but then it takes a special someone, doesn't matter if it's male, female, whatever, to pull your head out of your ass and you realize you're totally being a jackass. So, and that would be my fiance. So, but I love transparency like that, because you've got a heck of a backstory. I was just doing a little screen sharing for the video watchers. Again, people listening, ladies and gentlemen, remember, it's her name, Ginni, G-I-N as in Nancy, I, media.com. GinniMedia.com is a lot of the screen sharing that we're doing today. You can follow her on Facebook and Instagram too, at The Ginni Show. But I brought up her bio sheet because there's a couple of little powerful things you just have thrown in there. But obviously, We've got some key words here. Young Sri Lankan gay immigrant woman growing up in Australia. You got your aunties. You got 170 cousins. There's like some celebrity stuff going on here. You got homosexuality, the fact that it's still a criminalized act where you're born in Sri Lanka. So I can't skip over this. We got to dive into some of this backstory.
Of course.
You love standing out and being different, don't you?
Well, I didn't intend to be, I don't know what the term the cool kids call it, a trailblazer, but, it gets to a point, and I think this is in anyone's journey, whether you're gay, straight, gender nonconforming, however you identify or whoever you love, I think it gets to a point in your life, whether it be about sexuality or be about simply what you want to do with your life, there is the path that's expected of you. There's the music or the language and the teachings and the lessons that are taught to you. And then there's your true authentic self, that path where you're like, okay, I've been taught these things. This is the music that I've been played my whole life. But sometimes it's okay. And I use this as a metaphor when I say this. Sometimes it's okay to like your own music too. The music that you've been played your whole life from your parents and their parents, which is essentially what it is, because your parents just regurgitate the tape recorder of their parents and previous parents. So, their music has worked for them. It's kept them safe. It's kept them healthy and alive. So they're going to be like, hey, listen to my music. It works for me. But for me, I knew from a very young age that the music that I was being played wasn't in alignment with who I truly was. And, obviously homosexuality being a criminalized act. And, I think before it's 20 years imprisonment now. I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, my history is not the best, but I think it was a bigger kind of punishment or bigger kind of legality before.
Wow.
But it's clearly, culturally, it's been a bit of a challenge to kind of talk about it. And, there's still sometimes, family members don't really mention it. And there's, on the other hand, on the other side of the coin, there's still family members who do talk about it and are open to hearing what I have to say.
So yeah, clearly you have a huge family.
Yeah. Well, I say 170 cousins now. This is including first cousins, second cousins, third cousins, and cousins from cousins.
You got me beat.
It's a lot of cousins, let's just say. And, Christmas and Easter and all the celebrations, they're never really small here in Australia, unless there's some political argument going on between two sides of the family. And then it's the whole other thing. I actually always joke around with my family saying, can you please send an email newsletter every month so I know who we're talking to and who we're not, because it is that political sometimes. But yeah, look, it's definitely, I kind of like to call myself the OG of my family, and that's not original gangster, it's the original gay. So I know anyone else who comes out after me is going to, is going to have a little bit of an easier, I won't say it's going to be the easiest, but it will be easier because there's already someone out there who was gay, and anything that they do and don't do will be blamed on me. It's like Ellen, really. Had she not have taken the bullet for all us lesbians, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. Because Ellen, we always say,
trailblazer.
Definitely. And to the point where, she obviously had her time where she suffered as a result of coming out, but look at her now laughing 13, 14 seasons later and making people laugh too. It's just amazing. And
she's doing what she loves, makes great money doing it. It's like she couldn't have planned that any
exactly.
better.
Exactly. And the thing is, she didn't plan it.
That's
she
the
was
beauty
just,
of
again, being authentic to who she was. Yeah. So it's just one of those things, I guess, there'll be a first for every family, or a first in the family to break the tradition. And I guess in my culture, where family is so important and there's traditions and values of the country that are brought no matter where you end up living in the world, it's been, I guess it's both been an honor and a challenge to kind of open people's minds up to different ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm. I mean, people think that we're a very forward country here in North America and the US of A, but trust me, all you got to do is watch the news. We still have a lot of opportunity to improve. So,
yeah. I've noticed that when I moved there, when I moved to New York, I'm like, well, New York's, I guess, it's kind of a little bit of a bubble in terms of openness and diversity, but there are parts of America.
It's like the largest city in North America. So it's like, if you can't make that happen there's something wrong. So
exactly. Exactly.
But I mean, if you look at large cities in general, for the most part, that's pretty accurate. I mean, you look at LA, San Diego. I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, I don't know about Texas, but I mean, we're not trying to call different states out, but there's definitely some more forward openness in larger populated, more, I don't know, more shifting, I guess, surroundings, I guess you want to call it.
Definitely.
I told people for years I could care less. Like, what do you mean? Like, I don't care. I don't care if you're male, female, whatever you're doing. I mean, if you're cool and you're fun to hang out with, or you're fun to rap with on a podcast, game on. I mean, I could care less. I mean, like, life is too short to dwell on stuff like that. I'm like, man, I never did understand that. And to be fair, I kind of grew up in maybe a closed off family back in the day. I just chose to a more open path in my life. So, and I've had people close to me with these, are they still calling it the alternative lifestyle? Because I mean, it's pretty mainstream now. Yes. So I don't know if you really want to call it the alternative.
Well, I know some people are referring it to that kind of lifestyle or the alternative. And I love how some people are calling it still a lifestyle, because for some people it's not really.
It's like, for the next couple of years, I'm gonna give this one a swing, see how it works out. Like, well, really?
I'm curious to know too, Scott. I mean, you mentioned that you grew up in quite a conservative, closed up type of environment. Yeah. What do you think it was about you and your experiences that you kind of felt? Like, how did you develop such an openness or being open-minded?
Maybe I think it just came down to the fact that I just don't like doing what people tell me to do. So, like, I grew up as a farm kid. I was born in New Jersey. My dad had a dairy farm. My dad and my brother to this day are organic cattle brokers and transporters in central Pennsylvania. Something clicked at a young age. I'm like, I want nothing to do with this. I started studying technology in high school. And then I just started seeing, I mean, I will admit there was a period in there where, I don't know if you guys use this in Australia, but there's that term of keeping up with the Joneses. Like you unfortunately start trying to do that everybody else is doing and thinking that that's the right path. But it opened me. It allowed me to say, you know what if this? What if that? Maybe. And then I started chasing, education and corporate dreams. Like, I'm the first person in my family to have finished a degree and go to college. I paid my own way. And that doesn't make me any better than them, but I've always been that guy. Like, I love being out on the edge and doing something different. And along that path and along that way, yes, you come across people of different lifestyle choices, different upbringings. I've ended up loving, like, I just went to South Africa last year for 2 weeks with my fiance. We went down there for an equine horse veterinary conference. My fiance is a horse doctor. So I never, if I hadn't met her, like, I never would have had an opportunity to take a trip like that. So you have to learn to appreciate these differences. Cause, like, again, goes back to that, what if? And exactly. And actually, like, two of the doctors on the safari conference were lesbian. I could care less. I'm like, cool. They were fun. We were having competitions on who could buy the next bottle of wine because the dollar exchange rate down there was amazing. So we were living like royalty.
Fantastic. It's great that you were I guess in a way you were a trailblazer too. You kind of didn't want to listen to being told what to do. But again, I think it comes down to the point at some point in your inner Scott, it just didn't feel right to be listening to those directions.
Yeah. And if I think far enough back, I did have an uncle that was gay, and I didn't see him any different than anybody else. But the one thing that kind of actually inspired me from a young age was he was always doing nonprofit things, volunteering. He was the only person in my family doing these great, good things for people. And to this day, that is a huge piece of my life. And he has since passed away years ago, but he was, I guess you could call him like a great uncle. I don't know. But he's just a great guy. Yeah. And he did all these great things. So it was hard for people to talk negatively about him because he did so many good things for his community. And that left a mark on me too. And it's like right there, it's like, now granted, you don't have to be a homosexual to be inspiring people to do not-for-profit activities. So I mean, clearly I'm a heterosexual and I'm doing a lot of not-for-profit activities. So the point is, like, these are your influencers. Like, who are the, it goes back to that Jim Rohn quote. I'm always sharing that one. Like, you're the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Like, if you want to open your mind, find other people to open your mind.
Exactly.
And be open to that transition.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I think I'm paraphrasing a quote here by Rumi, and I'm paraphrasing it terribly, but I think he said that your environment can be stronger than your will. And it's so true. If you are surrounded by people and positive influences, it is that support system and that network that's the foundation to pick you up or bring you down, really. Because if you keep that kind of in check as you go along in your journey, they will support you, cheer you on, or not. So really, it's so true. Your influences are key to your development.
Well, back to environment then. I mean, what was the percentage of your family in regards to that support in your environment? Was there a good chunk or no? I mean...
Well, the thing was, this is a thing. So my family, my greater family found out so clearly there is a big family here, and there are family that I'm closer to than others. Mm-hmm. So when I I was hosting a TV program here in Australia called Bent TV on Monday nights, and it was on Channel 31. Now, Channel 31 has very diverse programming here in Melbourne. So you've got programming tailored to certain ethnicities and cultures, and you've got programs, that there are gay programs on there. There are different kinds of programs. So my program was Monday, 10 p.m. And my auntie and uncle, I don't know why, they've kind of gotten off the hook on this one because they kind of put the attention towards me. But they were watching gay TV on a Monday night, and I'm still yet to find out why. Because they're like, but Ginni, it's like, yeah, I know Ginni's on there, but why were you two watching that? That's the question. So,
had they already known at that point, or no?
No, they didn't know. They saw me on TV clearly, and maybe they weren't expecting to see a family member.
So they just accidentally turned on during 10 p.m. the gay section of that network, and they just happened to stumble across you. Intriguing.
And they happened to stay on that show for as long as I was on. So I'm like, this is interesting. So
they were definitely curious, is what I'm feeling. I'm hearing.
I think they were curious. I actually haven't spoken to them about the logistics of the content of what they were consuming and how, but I do hope to one day, because I find it absolutely fascinating. Just the whole mentality of it, rather than what actually happened, just the mentality of, okay, you two were watching a gay program and how this played out to be what it was. It was just the human behavior behind it is so fascinating to me. But they watched this and then they saw me, and apparently I said, which I don't remember saying because I don't really say this out loud and I don't feel the need to say it anymore. Apparently I said something along the lines of, I'm Ginni and I am gay, which I don't remember or recall saying. And then they obviously figured out what that meant, and they called one auntie. I was like, did you know Ginni's gay? And that auntie called another auntie. Did you know that Ginni? So it went around the grapevine of my family, and then it got back to my sister, who in my inner family is the closest person to me. And she rang me. She said to me, look, I got a call from one of our aunties, and they said that this happened on TV. And it was like, I think for her, because she'd grown up majority of her life in Sri Lanka. She moved to Australia when she was like 13 or 14. And she's still very, I guess, she's still very traditional in some of her cultures. For her, it was a big shock because not only, even though she knew that, I identified as gay, I think now that this was out in public and other people started to know, I think that shook her up a little bit. And I remember her saying to me, it's like, we support you. Obviously, we're not going to do anything to go against you or anything like that. But, try and not be so gay in public. And I know she didn't mean that to sound the way that she did, but it was just one of those things where I thought, well, no, I'm not going to stop being who I am in public or in private. Like I wasn't doing anything that I felt was inappropriate. And I guess in terms of support, the blessing in that experience, even though how it played out, was that, yes, everyone knew. And I actually came out in the comfort of a TV screen in your own home. I didn't actually inconvenience you in any way. You got the news in your own living room on a HD screen. So
I feel like everything happens for a reason. That kind of just naturally unfolded. Yeah,
naturally. And, for me, even though it was a bit scary at the time, like I had that fear of, how will I be judged? Mm-hmm. The other side of it was that, okay, everyone knows now, I don't have to tell anyone anything. And I guess it also filters out who is supportive and who isn't, eventually. And that's what happened. The percentage is still, I only really keep in touch with a select handful of family, but they all know, and they're very open to hearing about my life as they always have been. So it's been great that way.
Well, I was going to ask about that. Like, obviously, fast forward, and it's now 2019, and it's has a lot of that morphed to a more positive layer, because it's interesting because, like, for example, like I continue to be surround myself with this, because like one of my newer medium-sized clients, one of the co-founders of the company, which I talk to every single week, he's gay, and he's a former like top executive of Playboy. And I just thought that was funny. I'm like, wait a minute, were you gay when you worked there? And he said, oh yeah. He's like, that's probably why I did so well, because they knew that I wouldn't, get distracted or whatever.
Yeah. He was so focused.
It just makes for a great backstory. But it's like, again, back to the point, like whether you're a homosexual or heterosexual, this guy is highly intelligent, a top performer. I mean, he had an amazing career. I mean, now he's running a pure vitamin company and a pure coffee club with my other client, their co-founders. And it's just, I get to hang with this guy every single week on webinar calls. And it's, again, I could care less. It's like, listen, you're successful. It doesn't matter what your lifestyle choices are. But I'm sure from that career, that guy probably has amazing backstories.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd imagine he'd have quite a few stories to be able to share.
But I mean, when you got into media, that probably wasn't even, would you say being down in Melbourne, was that more new agey and acceptable when you got into that time slot? I don't know.
Well, I guess like Joy 94.9 was actually, it's Australia's first and only gay radio station. So it wasn't, that aspect, it wasn't difficult for me to be myself. In fact, that was also the hesitation getting behind the microphone, because I knew as soon as I opened the mic, one, I have to be authentic. And secondly, there's no going back in the closet. Like, I may have had a foot out of the closet, but I can't put that foot back in again.
Yeah, you're all.
So I knew that
instead of all in, you're all out at that point.
Yeah, I'm all out. I can't go back in the closet like that. Old green linen suit that I've hid back in there. I've got to be out there. So so I guess for me in media, it kind of took me a while to adjust when I started working in like commercial media. Do I come out? Is this relevant? And I guess the dialogue now is like, I hope that we can live in a coming out world where we don't have to have that conversation of, I'm going to sit you down, tell my parents to come out. I just love the conversation and the dialogue to head to a stage where you just have to say you're in love with someone, because I guess a sit down conversation, a declaration kind of implies that there's something either out of the ordinary that's going to happen, if that makes sense. But if we can kind of make it to a place where, hey, I'm in love, and not make such a big deal out of it, because it's really not a big deal. I'd love to live in a post-coming out world.
Well, you know what? Part of what you just said there, declaration, right? Like I've been sharing a lot of different stuff on the video feed for the listeners, and like this one pic that you had put up back in December of the Mastery Journal, my boy JLD. I know him well. I have all of his journals as well. Admittedly, I bought this journal, like multiple copies, to give them to some of my clients and some of my friends and colleagues, and I never even used it. So, but I still supported him and his crowdfunding efforts. I'm still in his communities. He and I have met at conferences and stuff, so we're cool. But part of that, that level of mastery just made me think of this, as you said it, is the power of declaration. And if you're setting goals, and actually, I just aired a podcast today, and the guy on there, Andre, he and I were talking, and we discussed the power of, not just setting your goal and setting a game plan to get the goal, but also being flexible in knowing that the path along all of that is going to shift and change. But one of the best things to help you get through all that is that powerful declaration of that goal. So there is a lot of energy that gets released and put forth when you declare something.
Absolutely. And I guess, in the world, like if we look at, LGBT rights, in terms of declaration of who you are, and we'll get back to, what you're talking about, JLD, I guess coming out is a step in the process of declaring, this is who I am, this is who I love. But I think the next step of evolution to that is just to integrate it generally into conversation. But again, like you did touch on a key point there, Scott, declaring something, and it invites the commitment and the investment of yourself into that. So for example, me investing in the Mastery Journal, it has changed my life in the last 30 days that I've been doing it, in the fact that I've got this book that I check in with every day, I've committed to a morning routine and a foundation which sets me up for the rest of the day and the week. It's so powerful in that. You're absolutely right. A declaration does invoke power, and it invokes discipline and commitment.
Well, I mean, I think people underestimate the power of all of that, right? But it takes stories like you have to share to just refresh, I think, people hearing this, remind them. It's like, oh, wow, something as simple as declaring a goal. You don't have to have, first of all, let's be real listeners out there, okay? Well, whether it's Ginni or whether it's me telling you this, everything's going to change. Get over it.
Exactly. Yeah.
That whole road, that path that you had really clear in your mind when you declared that new goal or that new lifestyle choice or whatever we're talking about, it's gonna change. And people who succeed the most are the ones who accept that, they own it, and they embrace the change. I learned that years ago in the business space. It's like, dude, the ones who embrace change, let it breeze right over them. You learn to roll with it in life. It makes it a lot easier to make these declarations. As you keep making new and new declarations, it gets easier to pull them off because you start realizing, wait a minute, these speed bumps and these hurdles. Okay, I'll get over it. No worries. Might take a little bit longer, a little faster. It's going to happen.
I think what we forget as humans are like we are animals. We can do everything that animals do except flying, but yet we've built a machine to help us fly. So that's
I love skydiving.
But we are very exactly. We are very adaptable. Like if we do declare it and we then commit to forming that behavior, then turning it into a habit, it will happen. It just takes that declaration as the first initial step.
Well, and I'm bringing up another image on your Instagram from December 7th, ladies and gentlemen. I love this one too. Is there's nothing like gratitude to anchor you into the present or push you to look at things, in a different way, right? So that totally aligns with everything you and I are talking about right now too. That's part of the process as well. Like accepting and also releasing daily gratitude, I'm sure, is probably something that came into your mastery journal as well, right?
Absolutely. So yes, in the Mastery Journal, there is a line saying, I'm grateful for this, and you write what you're grateful for. Generally, it's one sentence, but one of my best friends, Kim, she gives me a gratitude journal every Christmas, and it's actually a journal where every day you write 10 to 15 things you're grateful about, and everything is centered around gratitude. And gratitude's one of those things that is such a key to just happiness because it does do exactly that. It brings you into the present and it really can reshift your perspective. So for example, it's like, for example, if my car breaks down, there's two ways to look at it. One way you can look at it from a form of lack, an angle of lack, to be like, oh, my car's broken down, I can't do anything. Another way to look at it is I actually have a car and I actually have an income to get that car repaired. And I'm grateful that I have feet that I can actually walk and run and move with and find my other way of transportation. So it all comes down to your perspective in that very moment. And I find gratitude is just such a key anchor to really give you that perspective. Because, I was thinking, someone said to me one day, one thing that they're grateful for is their legs. Like think about people who can't run or walk or feel the earth beneath their feet. Like that's something that they like every day, but we take for granted because, we don't know any better, right? But, sometimes when I go for a run, even though I complain going, oh my God, I have to exercise and oh my God, I have to work out. I have legs, I can run and I am forming into my shape, whatever it may be. So it's so true there, Scott. Gratitude is a very key component of moving forward in life. Positively.
No, I love the fact you brought all that up just now because I'm a huge cyclist. Obviously I got bike art behind me on the wall and I do a lot of mountain biking and road cycling. And I try and embody a healthy, fit lifestyle, not just for the podcast, but in general. And this gratitude piece you just spoke of is like recently, just before the new year, a buddy of mine that I know from the biking community, he's been on the podcast a couple of times. That guy's learned to become more transparent through his own struggles of becoming a father and his own battle with depression and things of that nature. And then he and I did some charity work together on Thanksgiving, something that I've been doing up in New York, in Harlem for 8 years now. We feed 2,000 meals to the streets on Thanksgiving morning. And
wow.
So he came to that. That's his first time coming along. He's now like an ambassador for Live the Fuel, which is super cool. Like he's just obsessed with it. I'm honored to have an ambassador. But anyway, he texts me after that, like right before Christmas, like, Scott, you got to meet this incredible kid. He's so inspiring. I want to help this kid and get him a hand bike. And I'm like, why a hand bike? And he's like, well, this kid lives with cerebral palsy. And I mean, these are just one of those, inspiring gratitude stories for the new year. And I wanted to mix it in with what you're sharing with us, because I'm like, I never even met this kid, but shout out to Brian Strausser. He listens to the show all the time, and he's like, dude, we got to help this kid out. Like, he's like, I want to raise money and buy him the hand bike, because I took him hiking, a limited hike, obviously with his condition and the crutches he has to use. But he's like, we just started talking and having a conversation. I got to learn more about his horrific childhood. He was born in Russia with cerebral palsy. And over there, talking about differences of countries and lifestyles, right? They cast him aside. Like he was not of a whole human being, so to speak. So his family basically cast him aside, and not of sexual preference, but of what he was born with. And there's these things over there called baby houses. And I guess he's just not a good place for kids to go. And there's a book written about his childhood called Baby House 10. And this kid was tortured, burned, malnourished, not fed. And this woman here in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, the next city next to me here, like basically found out about this kid. She adopted him, got him out of Russia. Now he lives like 10, 15 minutes from me. And anyway, so just a powerful story. And so next thing you know, Brian reaches out to me, and I was like, I didn't even hesitate. The gratitude set in. Wow. I'm like, let's do this. I know social media. I know crowdfunding. I'm at my hotel in upstate New York on a business trip. And that night until like midnight, I'm like, I'm designing graphics, throwing a GoFundMe page up, and then launching it on social media. We do Facebook Lives. I haven't even met the kid. And in less than 48 hours, we raised the $1,100 for the hand bike. The bike was already on order. And then I meet the kid. I come back local, and I meet him at a Starbucks. I'm like, listen, would you like to go live on Facebook just to share who you are, so people see that we're not messing around? And anyway, within 4 days, we end up raising over $3,000. So, and then I find out, it's like, right, you hear this stuff. It gets the hair up on my arms. And then I found out the kid's going to Penn State University, the local campus here. He's trying to better himself. And he has a dream to start his own not-for-profit to help other people like him. So it's like, well, bro, we've already raised money for the bike. So everything beyond that, this is before we hit 3,000. I said on Facebook Live, I was like, one, I'm sponsoring your 501c3 form, the 1023 Easy, or whatever the heck the IRS calls it. I was like, done. I will pay the $400 for that. That's my sponsorship. Anything else we raise in this GoFundMe goes to a startup account for your non-for-profit. So this kid is just blown away. And then obviously, I mean, it's just like, that's the stuff. Like gratitude can create so much more other change, because I'm grateful that I actually have learned what I've learned thanks to podcasting and the power of sharing these stories like you've shared with us today, right? It's just like, doesn't that make you feel good?
Just listening to what you just said there, Scott, like gratitude, look at what it's created for you. Look at all look at the impact that you've been able to have on this kid's life and future kids' life. The grace that you're creating for yourself and that you're passing on to others, it's totally amazing. And I think you've created quite a flow of abundance for yourself as a result, because you're giving. The key thing to giving and gratitude, well, gratitude's actually the starting point, but the key thing that what you're doing of being of service is you're giving and being of service without an expectation or attachment. You're doing it purely because you're a good dude and you want to help this guy out.
Oh, totally. Like there was no underlying thing. Like my buddy just said, dude, I could use your help. And I'm like, yeah, I could do this stuff in my sleep. Let's do it. I've kept Brian. Brian has been at the head of it. I'm like, yeah, I'm the guy orchestrating some of the stuff. I'm like, Brian, this is your project, dude. Like you inspired this. You need to lead the way. I'm just one of the tools helping make it happen, because I would never even found out about this kid, John, if it wasn't for Brian and his huge heart. So I just get to be like a big team player, and it's just awesome. So
it's fantastic. It's actually quite a hard skill to master, giving without expectation. It's quite a hard, I mean, it probably comes so naturally to you, Scott, now, because I'm trying to master productivity. You've already mastered the art of giving without expectation. A lot of people struggle to do that. because there's some egoic attachment to giving or sharing, but you've mastered that. And as a result, the reward of that is creating the abundant life and the happy life that you have for yourself.
Oh, it takes time. I mean, I used to feel guilty because like people are like, oh, well, but you're sharing this stuff. Like every year when I would go to Harlem, I would do a live video or I do posts, and people are like, oh, you're just trying to get some more likes or whatever. And I'm like, no, dude, I'm trying to share something that means something to me that I stumbled across years ago when I was visiting New York after I spent a couple of years doing wildland firefighting out west. And that's part of my backstory. Wow. That's why there's fire in my logo. That's what got me to leave the corporate world and create everything since. I'm finishing the book on that now. So it's like, and it's trickled through in the past 240 plus podcast shows too. Like I try and mix it in a little bit so people just understand where this stuff doesn't happen overnight. As you just I had to learn these things. I had to put in the reps. Like you, I mean, everything. Your whole backstory is powerful, and you have a crazy amount of followers. I mean, just on Instagram, you got like over 10,000 followers, right? I have nowhere near that, but it doesn't matter about the quantity. It matters about the quality of the messaging that you're putting out there and the people that you're also helping. And that's taken you a long time to understand and appreciate too.
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on it. It's not about the likes that you get or the followers. It's the impact that you have. And I think if you start looking at that, because a lot of people nowadays have that disconnect between, you're talking about the Joneses before, Scott, reminded me of some content that I've been watching from Gary Vee. He talks about the effing Joneses. He's like, screw the Joneses. I'm going to kill the Joneses. It's funny, but it's so true. But I think a lot of people look at the Joneses and they develop this comparative paralysis. They're like, oh, why aren't they? Why am I not there? And why don't I have this? And automatically you're in that energy of comparison and you're in that energy of lack. It's a very short kind of moment where you change over that in your mindset. But it may be a short transition and a really quick one, but it's so impactful. So I think that patience that you deploy and taking one step at a time, putting one foot in front of the other to create the grander scheme of things. Like with my podcast, I've been doing this for 3 years. And before then, I was working for free in radio for a number of years, getting up at 4 a.m. That is a
putting
real
in the reps.
grind. That's the reps. And it doesn't come like easy. If this was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Right.
And everyone would want to get up at 4 a.m. and do that. But not everyone's wired that way. But again, it comes back down to, like what you said, what makes you happy, what makes you feel purposeful. And, you were a firefighter and you kind of learnt a lot from the corporate world, and you move to this now. You've been able to impart that wisdom. So it really does come back down to it's not the amount of followers or the likes that you get. It really is the impact that you make, and the followers will come if you just keep focusing on that.
I couldn't have said it any better. It's quality versus quantity. We just talked about it on the last show I recorded before you hopped on today. And it comes up more and more because that goes back to productivity hack as well, is that people think, oh, well, I just got to put in a ton of reps. Now, technically, what you and I just said, there was a lot of repetition over a period of time. That doesn't mean that you dump 1,000 reps into the next 24 hours and now you're a productivity master. No.
Exactly.
You want to get burned. That's a great way to get burned out.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing Elizabeth Gilbert, I was thinking about her today because, I'm quite aware of, she talks about the shit sandwich that you have to eat. I'm not sure if we're allowed to
I love it.
swear on here. But
you can say whatever the hell you want. I don't care.
Gary Vee talks about, everyone's got to know their burger, or like everyone's got to eat shit to eat caviar. But like, I'm well aware of what my shit sandwich was. I ate it. Some days I still eat it, but you've got to be also, it's not all roses all the time. You've got to go through some grind and some hustle and some things to get to the caviar. But it's forever changing courses. You're not always going to be on one course, but you have to keep that in perspective.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, it's very easy to get pushed off of that. So, and that's why, again, more reasons why I love podcasting, right? Because you and I are talking about that now, and hopefully 1, 2, 50, 500 who hear this, it clicks with that certain person and it helps them through their own journey. And that's why I love the transparency of podcasting too. And that's why I've appreciated and I'm grateful for this platform helping me throughout my process too. This has come up many, many times. It's like I never set out to become more transparent thanks to my podcast. That just all of a sudden was just one of these added grateful benefits that came out of it. And I'm like, I just love it. I can't not talk about it because I think it's changed me to be a better person. And I'm not saying podcasting is going to do that for everyone, but clearly it's a powerful platform from somebody like yourself too. So
absolutely.
I mean, it's so powerful. I mean, we're coming towards the end of the show, but I can't just not talk a little bit more about like some of the services you're doing these days. So you're so passionate about podcasting. I want to make sure I segue this before we come to the end, but you're helping others with this too.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, we're talking about the impact of podcasting and why I love conversation so much. But really, podcasting nowadays, it's such a medium that, again, can make such an impact because it's so intimate and it's so authentic. So, yeah, Ginni Media is obviously a very narcissistic name, but I thought, hey, if I'm going to remember it, it's going to be my name. I've got to own it. But so we offer, podcasting content production for entrepreneurs, small businesses, and Fortune 500 companies. So everything that you need to do to run a podcast, whether it be to start it, to launch it, to continue producing it, we offer everything from, coaching to audio production to social media content creation to promote the podcast. Everything that you need to do a podcast, we've built a team around that around the world. And it's been really exciting because this has been my passion project for a while. And, 2018 was the first year that I went all in. And it happened to be the year that I moved to New York City. So it all was divinely aligned and executed. So that's what we do at Ginni Media. We just live, breathe, sleep podcasting, much like I do.
And obviously, thanks to the power of technology, you're the team that you have supporting you, probably it's all virtual, right? Because you don't need physical offices anymore. Yeah. So.
No, actually, I've got 2 people in New York, but the rest are all around the United States, Australia, Philippines. That's kind of all my team. Right there.
I love VAs.
VAs are great. One of my goals in 2019 is to hire an assistant, but also to maximize what I need that assistant to do. So I'm still trying to figure that out. But yeah, the internet has really changed life.
If it strengthens your position, I tell people all the time, I have never, ever, since founding this show, edited my own episode.
Wow.
I've outsourced editing since day one.
Wow. You're smart. Well, you know your strengths. That's
because I download all the software and I'm pretty techie and I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is not fun for me. I don't even want to deal with it. My first editor I found on Fiverr. So
there you go. It's so true.
I don't care. Like I have a professional voiceover intro and outro. The only editing that needs to get done is just chopping that onto the beginning and the ending. And then every once in a while, I'll do like a custom secondary outro or promo reel, but I don't do ads during the show or anything. I believe in good, pure content. But I just don't want to deal with this. I'm just going to hand that off. Like, there you go. Outsource your weaknesses, and focus on your strengths. So.
Exactly. Thank you for that tip, Scott. I'm going to use that when it comes to the VA. Because I've built a team around what I don't enjoy doing and what I'm good at, but not the best at. But I think that's a very good tip.
Well, my newest VA my newest VA for 2019 was I finally launched a secondary inbox. So anything podcast relating now, I want people to email podcast@livethefuel.com instead of my main email, because then I have a VA monitoring that box now. And then I do all of my show's project flow management. Everything is done through Trello. So I just add in my VA into my project team, and then they're updating me if they meet my criteria or they need me to evaluate them or whatever. It's still being worked out perfectly, but it's like, hey, I have the tools. I just have to implement them in a way that alleviates my time. And because my time, what is your time worth to you? Right?
Exactly. So, exactly. It's the greatest asset we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this has been awesome. I don't know about you. I've been having a blast. So.
Oh no, I've had a ball, Scott. I wasn't sure how this conversation would go, but it's clearly exceeded my very vague expectations of what it would be. But it's been amazing. I've learned a lot from you. So thank you for the wisdom that you shared.
And I've learned a lot from you as well. That's why we have guest co-hosts and not interviews. I want it to be a two-way learning and entertaining process. And the more jackassery, that's my key word of the day, the better. But back to you, and I always have my guest co-host close out the show. Like, just give us like a closing comments or your thoughts or maybe some goals you have for 2019. I call it the final words. But if our listeners forget everything else that you and I talked about, which is silly because you can just pause and rewind. It's digital content. What would you like to leave them with?
I think 2019 for me, as we discussed, was a year that I'm really committing to being very productive with my time. And by that, I mean, one key factor from that, learning from the Mastery Journal, is setting up my morning routine. And I guess that's really been lacking for me in the last year because I've jumped into this business, and that was kind of my priority from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. That was what I lived, breathed, and slept, my business. But I did notice over time, like, your energy levels aren't the highest, and, you're probably not getting that full round happiness that you want in the other aspects of life as well. So I think 2019 really, if there's any kind of wisdom that I could leave you with or any kind of tips, I would be really reverse engineer what makes you happy. And it's not just about work. It's got to incorporate your loved ones, your friends, your health, things that mean a lot to you. Like, what does happiness look like for you? And then work back from that. Because I think that's what's helped me for my morning routine and helped me be more productive with my time. And, we touched on it vaguely about VAs and that kind of thing. It's not, you don't have to necessarily hire a VA, but just be really pragmatic about that. Like, be non-negotiable. These are things that I want to do in the morning for me. Set your day up around you rather than, being subject to other people's wants and needs and demands. So I think that's what I could leave you with. Really figure out what makes you happy and then work back from that. I
love that. Well, listen, and I'll add a couple addendums onto that. Not just what's happy, but thanks to a guest co-host that I just aired today, episode 243, shout out to Andre Young. He actually said, I'd like to help correct that and say, listen, it's not just about the happiness, because that's gotten a very vague definition these days. He's like, what actually brings you joy?
That's a great way. Actually, I'm going to use that.
Right? And I was like, oh, man, talk about dropping the mic. I mean, that's... Woo! That went right through me, man. So he nailed that one.
Yeah.
Then also back to the business component is everything you just said and everything you just shared by your own transparency with trying to improve your daily hacks and your morning goals and et cetera. I remind myself from having a 20, 30 person team years ago in the corporate space was, well, if you strip all of your employees away, whether you're a business owner or not, you're left with yourself. If you have no more VAs, no more employees, everything comes back to you. So if you're not taking care of you, you are your best employee. So what are you doing?
Exactly.
Everything can hit the fan tomorrow, and then everything falls back on you. So
exactly. Absolutely right. 100%.
Our health is our true wealth. So
absolutely. That's a great takeaway.
Well, listen, Ginni, hang tight. I want to give you a proper goodbye off the air. Ladies and gentlemen, talk about dropping some serious mics today from Australia. Again, I've done screen sharing this whole episode, so make sure you check it out on YouTube because we showed off again. You can follow her at The Ginni Show, Ginni, on Instagram and on Facebook, or just go to her main site, GinniMedia.com. But again, she dropped a lot of bombs, a lot of transparency. I love the backstory. But obviously, you're listening to this podcast because you like podcasts. So as I've reminded everybody else so far here in 2019, sharing is caring. So if you learned something today, please share this, get us a review. Make sure you share it so Ginni gets some more exposure as well. She was kind enough to join you today. So again, ladies and gentlemen, we're here to fuel your health, your business, and your lifestyle. And we definitely did that today. So remember, you too can live the fuel. And we'll talk to you guys again soon.
Oh, you're a